Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take those topics you're curious about, grab a bunch of sources you've sent our way, and we pull out the key stuff.
Yeah, the idea is to give you that feeling, of being really clued in fast.
And today we're diving into Neil Postman's Amusing Ourselves to Death. It came out way back in 1985, believe it or not.
Right, and our mission, your mission with us today, is to really get Postman's core ideas and figure out, are they still relevant? Especially now with the internet, social media. It's a whole different world from 1980s TV.
Yeah, a totally different media landscape.
We've got some really interesting material to work with here.
Because Postman's central idea, it's pretty unsettling, actually.
Yeah.
He argued that television, because it's all about entertainment, was basically turning everything else, politics, news, even religion, into, show business.
He was really worried we were losing something important, losing our ability maybe to engage in serious rational thought, because we just wanted to be amused.
Passively amused, yeah. And people often call his work prophetic, right?
They do. But it's not just about him, predicting Twitter or something. It's deeper. He nailed the fundamental logic of media, how the very form, the structure of a medium kind of shapes our discourse, our way of knowing things.
Which is super relevant if, you listening, you want to grasp things quickly but also deeply. It's about how we know what we know.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's kick off with this comparison he makes. It's Huxley versus Orwell. Really sets the stage.
Oh, right. Postman uses Aldous Huxley's Brave New World and George Orwell's 1984. Two, classic dystopian visions.
Very different visions, though.
Totally different. Orwell, he warned about Big Brother, over control, censorship, state oppression, boots stamping on faces.
Classic tyranny.
Yeah. But Huxley, he imagined control coming through pleasure. Constant entertainment, distractions, basically keeping people docile and happy.
So they don't even notice their freedom slipping away.
Precisely. And Postman's big point was, we weren't really heading towards Orwell's world, despite Cold War fears maybe. We were drifting towards Huxley's.
We were choosing the entertainment.
Yes, voluntarily.
Yeah.
He saw television as the modern soma, that drug and Brave New World that keeps everyone happy and numb.
So it's not force, it's seduction.
Yeah.
We just give ourselves over to the stream of amusement.
That's the idea. We become kind of indifferent to serious stuff because we're constantly entertained. Yeah. And that's the core of amusing ourselves to death. It's not literal death, obviously.
Yeah,
It's the death of a culture capable of sustained, rational thought. Huxley himself warned about people coming to love their oppression, to adore the very technologies that undo their ability to think.
Yeah. So the danger is we get so hooked on trivial entertainment that we lose sight of what's actually important.
And we wouldn't even care as long as the show goes on. That's the chilling part.
It really is. Okay, so how does the medium itself, the form of TV, actually cause this change? It's not just the content, right?
Right. This is crucial. Postman adapted Marshall McLuhan's famous idea. He said, the medium is the metaphor, not just the message.
Okay, unpack that a bit. The medium is the metaphor.
He meant that media aren't just neutral pipes for information. They actively shape how we think, how we perceive reality. Each medium offers a different orientation, a different way of expressing ideas, and that, in turn, creates the content of our culture.
So watching TV isn't just about seeing the show. The act of watching TV itself changes how we process information.
Exactly. It structures our experience. Postman talked about epistemology.
Right, the theory of knowledge, how a culture decides what's true.
Yeah. And he argued the dominant medium deeply influences a culture's epistemology. What counts as truth, how we verify it, it's all tied to the biases of our main communication tools. Truth needs the right clothing, as he put it.
So in a print-based culture, truth might look like logical arguments, evidence, facts in a row.
Linearity, coherence, verifiable propositions. That's the bias of print.
But on TV?
TV's bias is towards, visual appeal, emotional resonance, maybe immediacy. Believability can come from how something looks or feels, rather than just logic.
And this shapes our common sense without us even realizing it.
Deeply, at a preconscious level, which leads right into his next big idea, the Faustian bargain. The deal with the devil, selling your soul for what? Convenience, entertainment.
Pretty much. Postman said every new technology offers benefits, something appealing. But there's always a hidden cost, unforeseen consequences. We get the good stuff, but we pay a price, and we don't always see it coming.
So we get instant news updates, but maybe the price is less context, or
Yeah.
less ability to focus.
Exactly. The price could be the erosion of critical thinking or coherent public discussion, and we might only recognize that loss looking back.
It's never just a simple trade-up then. There are always these complex trade-offs.
Right. Postman drew on thinkers like McLuhan and Harold Innis, seeing technological change as ecological.
Meaning it changes the whole environment, not just adds one new thing.
Precisely. A new medium transforms the entire media landscape. It changes the older media, it reshapes culture, even how our brains work. It's not just additive, it's transformative.
He also talked about the Frankenstein syndrome, didn't he? Tech taking on a life of its own. Yeah, the idea that technology can develop its own ideas, leading society in directions nobody planned or wanted.
So the hidden cost might be losing fundamental abilities like sustained thought, and we only see it in hindsight.
That's the worry. Which brings us to Postman's big historical contrast, the shift from a print-based culture to the television era.
The Great Divide, he calls it. The age of typography versus the age of show business.
Exactly. First, the age of typography. He saw this period, roughly colonial times to the mid-1800s, as being shaped profoundly by print.
And he argued this made public discourse rational, serious, coherent, because that's the nature of print.
Yeah, that was his claim. Print, he believed, fostered a typographic mind, one comfortable with complexity, logic, sustained argument.
He points to things like high literacy rates back then, didn't he?
Yeah, high literacy in early America, and a public that apparently wanted to engage with complex ideas in print. Even public speaking, he argued, was modeled on the written word, long, complex sentences, sophisticated rhetoric.
So reading wasn't passive. It demanded active engagement, analysis, judgment.
It was an intellectually demanding activity.
And the Lincoln-Douglas debates are his star example, right? People standing for hours listening to complex arguments.
He holds that up as a kind of gold standard. Maybe a bit idealized, some critics say, but it's the benchmark he uses.
Okay, so that's the print era baseline. Then comes the age of show business.
Enter television as the dominant medium. And Postman argues its inherent biases just completely altered public discourse.
Prioritizing visuals, emotions, quick hits, novelty.
Speed over depth, yeah. He saw TV encouraging passive reception, shorter attention spans, making it harder to follow complex, sustained arguments.
And information gets chopped up, decontextualized, that famous, now this effect.
Exactly. Where a tragic news story is immediately followed by a cheerful commercial, undermining any sense of coherence or seriousness. The main goal, across the board, becomes entertainment.
Even for serious things.
Especially for serious things, which leads to his concept of disinformation.
Okay, what's that exactly? It's not just false information, is it?
No, that's misinformation. Disinformation, for Postman, is accurate information that's presented in such a trivial, fragmented, or entertaining way that it loses its meaning and context. It creates an illusion of being informed without any real understanding or call to action.
So you're flooded with facts, but they don't add up to anything meaningful.
Precisely. And he saw this impacting pretty much every area of public life. Politics, for instance.
Right, you mentioned this earlier. Shift from issues to images.
Yeah, from reasoned debate to a spectacle. Personalities, sound bites, how a candidate looks and sounds on TV becomes paramount. He famously said, cosmetics replaced ideology.
Wow. And campaigns started using advertising techniques.
Absolutely. Emotional appeals, image management, a shift from a discourse of propositions, logical arguments, to a discourse of images.
And religion, too.
Televangelism. He argued televised religion often prioritized the preacher's charisma, emotion, humor, spectacle, rather than deep theological exploration.
And education. He had some controversial takes there.
He did. He was notably critical of shows like Sesame Street.
Really? But Sesame Street is beloved.
He acknowledged its goals, but he worried it taught kids an unintended lesson, that learning must be fun, easy, and entertaining.
Undermining the idea that learning sometimes requires effort, discipline, sustained attention.
That was his concern. He saw TV-based learning as kind of solitary, image-driven, and ultimately sabotaging traditional schooling by fostering expectations that couldn't be met in a real classroom, leading to that sea of irrelevance.
Okay. And the news itself. You'd think that would be the stronghold of seriousness.
Not according to Postman. He saw television news fundamentally as entertainment programming.
How so?
Think about it. The theme music, the good-looking anchors, the commercial breaks, the dramatic visuals, the focus on conflict or human interest stories.
It's all packaged for easy consumption.
Exactly. Packaged for immediate appeal, often at the expense of depth, context, or complexity. This is where disinformation thrives, and where that information-to-action ratio gets skewed.
Meaning we feel like we know a lot, but we feel powerless to actually do anything with that information.
Yes, a sense of impotence fostered by this flood of entertaining but disconnected information. It's a pretty bleak picture of the TV age he painted.
It really is. So now the big question. How does all this hold up today? We're way past peak broadcast TV. We're in the age of the internet, social media.
And this is where Postman's work feels, for many people, startlingly relevant, almost prophetic, like we said.
People saw the internet coming and thought, Postman was right.
Well, maybe not predicting the tech itself, but predicting the effects. Scholars like Lance Straight, who literally wrote a book called Amazing Ourselves to Death, explicitly built on Postman's ideas for the digital age.
Because the core characteristics Postman criticized in TV.
The emphasis on visuals, the fragmentation, the shrinking attention spans, the priority of entertainment.
Seem like they're on steroids online.
Exactly. That's the argument. Camille Paglia, who initially argued against Postman, later conceded he basically nailed the trajectory towards this frantically all-consuming media culture of glitz, gossip, and greed that found its perfect expression online.
Because again, it's the form of the medium shaping the discourse.
Yes. The internet and social media, many argue, are just even more efficient, more pervasive at turning everything news, politics, personal life into entertainment.
He had that phrase, the peekaboo world, for television's fragmented reality. Has the internet just amplified that, made it faster, more constant? I mean, think about your phone buzzing all day, little fragments popping up.
Totally. That peekaboo world of disconnected, entertaining snippets. The internet and social media have scaled that up massively. The sheer volume, the speed, the constant notifications. It's designed for perpetual distraction.
So the information glut he talked about is even worse now.
Arguably, yes. Yeah. And that information-action ratio gets distorted even further. There's also a shift, maybe, from passive consumption on TV
to active participation online. We're not just watching the entertainment, we're creating and sharing it.
Right. We're co-creating the soma, in a way. And then you layer on algorithmic curation.
The algorithms deciding what we see.
Which act as this powerful kind of hidden curriculum, often prioritizing whatever's sensational, emotionally engaging, or just plain entertaining. It can reinforce all the tendencies Postman worried about.
So what does this mean for things like politics and news online? Does his critique still fit?
Well, remember his point about political credibility on TV, the impression of sincerity mattering more than substance.
Yeah, the persona.
That seems extremely relevant online, doesn't it? Personal branding, emotional connection, authenticity, perceived authenticity anyway, can easily overshadow policy substance.
And news online, still chasing entertainment.
Often, yes. Think clickbait headlines, emotionally charged framing, content designed to go viral, maybe even news presented like a game.
Yeah.
The forms evolve, but the underlying drive for amusement seems persistent.
But the internet is different, too. Postman thought TV wasn't really suited for, say, outright hate speech because it needed broad appeal. That's not true online.
That's a really important distinction. The online environment allows for hyperfragmentation. You get partisan media, echo chambers, unregulated spaces where, frankly, naked hate, as Postman might have put it, can be a form of engagement-driven entertainment for certain niches.
So it's not the homogenized broadcast audience anymore.
No, it's decentralized, networked, which leads to both niche content and these filter bubbles. But Postman's core concern that reasoned sequential discourse gets displaced by emotionally arousing, fleeting communication feels, if anything, more relevant.
And disinformation, the trivialized, context-free info must be rampant with personalized feeds.
Absolutely. Algorithmic personalization can make it even harder to get a shared sense of reality or context.
Okay, it's clear his ideas resonate, but amusing ourselves to death isn't without its critics, right? People push back.
Oh, definitely. It's a very debated book. One major criticism is technological determinism.
Meaning he blames the technology too much?
Yeah, the idea that he overemphasizes the power of the medium itself to dictate social change, and maybe underplays human agency, social factors, economic forces.
Like, we just passively accept whatever the technology does to us.
Some critics read him that way, though you could argue his Faustian bargain idea does imply choice, even if flawed. And the media ecology perspective sees it more as technology setting parameters within which humans act. It's nuanced.
What else? I've heard people say he's too nostalgic.
That's another big one. Accusations that he romanticizes the age of typography.
Making the past sound better than it was.
Right. Critics point out that 19th century newspapers were often sensationalist, not just filled with high-minded debate. And, literacy wasn't universal. Access to print was limited for many.
So maybe the typographic mind wasn't quite as widespread or purely rational as he suggests.
It's a fair point. There's also criticism of his sharp distinction between text and image.
That it's too simplistic. Text, good acquisitional, image, bait emotional.
Kind of. Critics argue images can convey complex truths. Think of powerful documentary photography. And text can obviously be used to manipulate or lie just as easily as images.
And wasn't Plato himself critical of writing for weakening memory? So print isn't inherently the only path to truth?
Exactly. Questioning whether print epistemology is the only valid one. Then there's the active audience critique.
That he sees viewers as too passive, just absorbing media effects.
Yeah, his focus on the medium shaping consciousness aligns more with older media effects models. Audience reception theories, which became more prominent later, emphasize that people actively interpret media based on their own contexts and experiences. They aren't just empty vessels.
His own son apparently pointed out that people use TV for social change sometimes.
Right. Andrew Postman noted that students reading the book often pointed to positive social changes facilitated by TV or ways viewers exert control.
And just the fact that it was written in 1985, some examples must feel dated now.
Inevitably. His point about TV not being congenial to hate speech, for example, feels quite different in the age of niche online platforms. And the nature of advertising and media ownership has evolved massively.
Plus, there are other ways to analyze media, right? Other theories.
Absolutely. You have cultural studies, thinkers like Stuart Hall or Raymond Williams, focusing more on the ideology within the content and how audiences negotiate meaning.
Less focus on the medium's form, more on the message and its reception.
Generally, yes. And then there's the political economy of media perspective, which stresses economic structures, ownership, and profit motives as the key drivers. They might say amusement isn't just inherent in TV, it's what advertisers pay for.
So lots of different lenses to view this through. It's not just Postman's way or the highway.
Definitely not. But despite all these valid criticisms and alternative views, the enduring power of the book is undeniable.
Why do you think it still resonates so much? Back to that prophetic idea.
I think so, but again, prophetic, because he focused on the form. Because the internet and social media share and even intensify many of the formal characteristics he critiqued in television. The visual bias, the fragmentation, the entertainment imperative. His analysis continues to feel relevant.
Even Camille Paglia came around, you said.
She did, acknowledging his prescience later on. And his contribution to media ecology is huge.
Remind us, media ecology is...
It's the study of media as environments, how they shape our perception, social organization, ways of thinking. Postman was central in popularizing this idea that media are not neutral conduits. They actively structure our world.
Seeing the whole ecosystem, the long-term impacts.
Exactly. It encourages a holistic, critical perspective. Thinkers like Lance Straight have really carried that torch forward, applying Postman's ecological thinking to the digital age.
So maybe the biggest legacy is providing a framework for critical media literacy.
I think that's right. His work is vital fuel for thinking critically about any dominant medium. We can adapt his spirit of inquiry to the digital world.
How would we do that? What does that look like today?
It means developing awareness of the economic systems, the political biases, the algorithmic nudges behind our screens, cultivating a more balanced, intentional relationship with technology, using these tools actively for knowledge and connection, not just passive amusement.
So it's not about throwing out our phones, but using his ideas to ask smarter questions about them.
Precisely. His legacy isn't a set of final answers, but a powerful, critical framework, a way of seeing.
So, wrapping up, Postman's central warning that our appetite for entertainment might reshape public discourse and erode rational thought, it still hits home, doesn't it? Even more so, maybe, in the digital age.
It really does seem to. And while, we have to balance his critique with nuance acknowledging audience agency, the complexities he didn't foresee the core concern feels incredibly timely.
The value is in the questioning, he prompts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Its primary value might be as a kind of hermeneutic of suspicion, a tool that encourages us to be skeptical and analytical about the media that surround us.
It's a foundational text for asking those critical questions about whatever new medium comes next. So, maybe the final thought for you, listening, is wrestling with this persistent dilemma. How do we navigate this world saturated with technologically driven amusement while still nurturing thoughtful, rational engagement?
It's the ongoing struggle, isn't it? How do we harness the benefits of these incredible tools without letting them diminish our capacity for deep thinking, for informed citizenship?
Yeah. Maybe the challenge isn't about eliminating amusement altogether.
But preventing it from becoming the default or the only mode through which we understand reality.
Yeah.
That's the tightrope Postman asks us to walk.